And good morning, Bills Mafia. That red light is on, which means this week's episode is officially live. And we have a very exciting matchup with a very familiar foe coming up on Sunday night. And joining me to talk about that, as well as some of the fun new additions to the Buffalo Bills roster, is Cover One's Ryan Sullivan. Thank you all so much for being here for this week's episode of Under Review. Let's commence forth.
Previous play will go under review.
And once again, everybody, thank you so much for being here. And as I mentioned earlier, my guest today is Cover One's Ryan Sullivan, who graciously joined me on short notice. I really appreciate you being here, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's been I don't know how it's been down in the city. Connecticut's had a really weird weather week. It was last Saturday, it was 80 degrees. And then Wednesday and Thursday this week, we had this great frost off our car. So I don't know how it's been where our viewers are, but it's been one of the weirder weather weeks we've had.
Yeah. I have experienced similar weather. It had a week ago when I did the show with Bruce, it was 80 degrees, and now it's like been a sick 30s, 40s, 50s, and I'm one of those people who I love fall. Like, I'm a sicko, so I do want that cold weather. It was really weird when I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt on my way to the gym on Saturday, but we have normal weather today, and we have a great show for all of you. Thank you for being here. RJ, I see you in the chat. I see all of you guys. If you could do us a solid, drop a like on this video. Drop a like on some of the other content coming out on Cover One. There's a link to the premium pass and a read coming later for it. But let's get in with this topic. And Ryan, it was quite an eventful week in the Bills community, in the team's spectrum, because we saw a few fun additions, and we had rumors and whispers about this team acquiring talent at the deadline. We thought maybe it could be receiver at first, and then that conversation kind of transitioned over to defense. And lo and behold, the team goes out and acquires Rasul Douglas, giving up a 3rd-round pick and acquiring a 5th-round pick in the mix. Let me hear your thoughts on just that transaction and your thoughts on the player in this defense.
I mean, it's really exciting. I mean, anytime you get a new player, it's super exciting. But the things that really kind of spoke to me before even looking at his play were looking at the comments of Packers fans and looking at comments of Packers players on this trade. You know, you read some of the stuff out of the beat reporters coming out of Green Bay, and players are really, really, really devastated about losing Rasul Douglas. There's some of the comments. Players said stick their stomach was one of the comments that came out. People said he was a stabilizing force in the locker room. There was a story that was tweeted out, and obviously I couldn't find it as I was trying to find the prep, but that, after one of their losses, he was holding court in his locker with Quay Walker and some of the younger players in Green Bay. So he was a really beloved player. And, it's a lot of those guys who are kind of cornerstone pieces of teams don't shake loose all that often. So get a guy of that just character coming out is massive before you even get into anything about his player, his ability.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was Aaron Jones. I watched the interview they had with him, and he was someone that had known Douglas for years, even before he got to Green Bay. And he told the story of how when I think Douglas was playing for the Eagles, they embraced after the game, and he said, "We need to get you to Green Bay." And then he got there, and they were obviously close friends, and Douglas takes this leadership role in the secondary and plays really the best ball of his career in a team that really relied on him and counted on his leadership. It's not often that at the deadline you see a player with that kind of presence go and just in the blink of an eye is no longer in your locker room, unless it's obviously like an injury that has to derail them for some time or if they get traded. But in this case, they lose him. And as you said, and as I've seen other members of Cover One say, to lose that level of leadership and to see how the players respond just speaks volumes to the character of the player that you're getting for your locker room, which isn't void of leadership by any means, but rather now acquiring a vocal voice that can come in, really gel and mesh with some other members of the secondary and be effective as a whole. So as far as how he plays in this defense, Ryan, what do you think of his skill set and what he could bring to the table?
Well, as I was kind of going through some of the stats leading up to this, he's almost like anti-Dane Jackson. Everyone kind of gets frustrated with Dane Jackson because he's always in a position to make a play on the ball, but it always seems like he's getting dunked on or he's getting a pass caught. And he never seems to be able to do that final step of making the play on the football. I know some of Dane Jackson's separation stats aren't great this year, but in general, that's been our frustration with him. And you look at Rasul Douglas, and his whole thing is he makes plays on the ball. This is from Eric's article this week over at Cover One. And since 2021, he's third in interceptions. He's 10th in pass defended since 2021. So he's a guy who's near the ball, makes plays on the ball, and all these things we've kind of been frustrated, as we've had to see more Dane Jackson again with Trey White going out, that we're getting someone who's really has a knack for getting on the ball and, making plays on the ball is one of those things that's almost unteachable. There's guys that are really good at seeming to get their hands on, they're getting their hands on picks, getting their hands on batted passes. And he seems like one of those guys. And Joe Marino had to tweet out earlier this week that one of the things that really kind of torpedoed this Bills defense was they were getting a ton of picks through the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. It's interceptions, fumbles. They have not been getting a lot of turnovers. So you're getting a guy who has the ability to kind of get those explosive plays on defense and hopefully help that Bills offense out, help the Bills defense out that needs to find some way to reach a middle ground. And because they've been one of the worst defenses since Trey White, since Matt Milano, since Daquan Jones has been out.
Yeah, they've desperately needed reinforcements after those injuries, after the Jacksonville game, really. They were starting to show kind of the holes that got left after these players got hurt. And when it comes to the need for Rasul Douglas, again, you said it, they were a defense that was aggressive and opportunistic. That was their MO. They would generate pressure. They would confuse you at the line of scrimmage. And if the pressure didn't bait you into making a mistake, then the thought of it coming made you make a mistake. And I think when you lose Trey White, who was playing at a very, very high level before his injury, I mean, basically back to his original status before the ACL tear, and now you lose Matt Milano, and now you lose Daquan Jones, and not only is your coverage taking a hit, but your interior pressure is taking a hit. You now are kind of scrambling to figure out how we can pivot this defense to get back to form despite the loss. Now, what we saw against Tampa Bay was an encouraging step forward because they did play a pretty dominant game, barring a few unfortunate circumstances at the end of the game that were preventable. But you saw a step in the right direction, and you saw some adjustments from McDermott that I think bode well for how this defense will continue on. But it's also a type of transition that you need to have the proper personnel for it. And with Rasul Douglas, as you mentioned, his instincts, his ability to attack the ball, his ability to play disciplined in zone are the things that I think they desperately need if they're trying to pull some of these exotic looks, or maybe, again, have Jordan Poyer be a dime backer and rely on really stout back-end coverage with a guy like Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford, who by all metrics has been playing incredibly well. Eric posted a video on our YouTube yesterday, just kind of highlighting some of Douglas's play. And one play that he essentially clipped off was when they were playing the Rams in Green Bay. And Rasul Douglas is basically bracketed with a high-low. So he could either take the high and bite off and they get someone wide open underneath, or he makes a play. He sits still and just attacks the ball. He doesn't get baited at all. He just makes an aggressive play on the ball. That kind of play, when you're talking about a defense that now is probably going to need to rely a bit more on coverage sacks to get that pressure home, is so valuable. And I'm really, really excited to see that in this defense. And ideally, sooner than later, we see kind of a return to form in the secondary and for McDermott's defense really as a whole. So, Ryan, any final thoughts on Rasul Douglas before we move on?
No, and I think I just think the deadline as a whole is a really good example of, deadlines in general that we always think when the Bills don't make a move or a team don't make a move that they're sitting there not doing anything. And all reports were Bean was incredibly active at this trade deadline. Like they were at everyone. They were trying to get Jalen Johnson, who would have been a really cool signing for, just long-term team building. But, it's if you're ever sitting there frustrated, why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening? There's so much stuff that goes on behind closed doors that some of the stuff you might, if you are a Cover One insider, you might be able to see in the Slack channel. Little drop there. You never know. So I think it was a good example that the show that Bean's always working, and he was able to bring one home this year.
Yeah, I think we conflate the lack of news with lack of effort, and that's just not true, right? Like Brandon Bean was definitely pushing and making calls, and to see that they were so in on Johnson tells me how much they value just really good coverage at that position. And the thing about Rasul Douglas is he isn't a rental either. They got a corner that they're going to have for at least next season, which I think is huge, because if you're going to part with the 3rd round pick, even with the compensatory you get, you need to make sure that this is a player that you get to hold on to. And Douglas is someone that they are going to have for the foreseeable future, which is just great, because if it pans out, expect more of that next year, eventually with hopefully Trey White coming back, and you have a really deep and solid cornerback room. But Ryan, there was
as Trey comes back too. Trey's coming. Trey's might not be ready week 1, so it's a nice little position that spot. A nice guy to have for 2 years here.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I love Trey White. I have a Trey White jersey. I hope he comes back. I want him back in full form. Like he's the dude. He's the heartbeat of the Bills defense. Like we talk about all these leaders, but man, Trey's been here since the start of the McDermott era, man. Like that is just someone that is integral. Like when I think of Bill's success, I'm thinking of Trey White. Like he's been there every step of the way. And that's just something that I absolutely love about him. So as always, you guys know that I have players I really love. Trey White is one of them. And if you somehow ever saw this, just know we're rooting for you, Trey. Hope to see you back soon. But Ryan, let's move on. There is another acquisition for the defense that occurred this week. It was my Twitter handle for some time, and then I decided, okay, I think people might not realize it's me tweeting. And that's Lynval Joseph. And we all know veteran D tackle, played for the Eagles on the Super Bowl team last year. I think he's 35 years old, still big, still a force. What do you think about him for this defense and how he could be used?
I mean, it's a really exciting pickup. And I think there's a little bit of chatter, on the timeline this week about, oh, well, he was out. No one signed him till now. What does that mean about how good he is? I mean, he's 35 years old. I would imagine if you asked him off the record, he would tell you there was probably a bunch of teams who were trying to get him to sign back in August. But if I was 35, you told me I only had to work half the year, I'd probably say the same thing. You look at it, just his snap count last year, he came in November of last year and he played in his 8 games last year. He played 40%, 60%, 24%, 30%, 54%, 49%, 30%, and 19% of snaps. So he played a lot of meaningful, impactful snaps last year. He took a large part of Jordan Davis's job, who was the 1st round pick in Philadelphia at 34 last year. So it's not like he's a guy who's yes, he's on the last leg of a career, but he's a guy who played well last year at his age. And he doesn't have to do that much. I think that's the big thing. His job, he doesn't need to be a racking up the stats guy. He doesn't need to get TFLs. He doesn't need to get sacks. He doesn't even need to get pressures. He needs to be really freaking big and not get moved. He needs to sit there, eat 2 blockers on rundowns, and that's really it. And that's a skill that doesn't really go away as long as you're staying in shape. And by all reports, he is.
Yeah, and I believe that they had been in contact with his agent for a couple of weeks. So I think that New England game might be the reason why they were in contact with this agent for a couple of weeks. And I think it's who just brought this up in the chat. It's Roy, who says, I'd rather have Lynval Joseph rotating at 1 tech than Jordan Phillips, with an angry emoji. Angry emoji justified, because we need help at run defense. And it's very clear that while there was only so many, routes you could possibly take if you're Brandon Bean as to who you bring in, this was probably the best outlet you could go, because you're getting someone who, again, 35, has been in the league for years, well over a decade, played for a Super Bowl team, has been stout at that position for his whole career. And yeah, like you said, Ryan, he's coming onto this team to not take the majority of the snaps, because we know that they want to really, it seems like Poona Ford is trending to be the fill-in for Daquan Jones while he's hurt. It's going to be him, but come in on the breaks where you need Ford off the field, where you have to have someone who can continue the trend of taking on a double team or being able to be stout and run defense, play that position, and just hope that you can shore it down. Because if you can, and you know that you can now have that rotation of D tackles that are playing effective in run defense, that's a huge boost for your defensive line as a whole. It's a huge boost for your defense as a whole, because now you don't really have to worry about getting gashed as often. You're not stressing about the inevitable 6 yards per carry a running back is going to have in the game, getting these dynamic backs you eventually face down the road that could absolutely 1-2 punch the interior of your defensive line. You have stability, a true anchor, someone that when your emerging DT that you signed in free agency needs a break can come in and fill in for. And I think if this works out, and Ryan, you could tell me if you agree or disagree with this, but should Lynval Joseph play up to par and he is able to just shore that up when he rotates, I think this benefits the Bills pass rush, and I think it benefits them in coverage as well, knowing that teams aren't going to be able to run on them as easily. Do you agree or do you disagree?
Well, I mean, I think this defense is totally different without, you look at what Daquan, and he's not going to come and be Daquan Jones, but you look at how different this defense plays with Daquan Jones. I forget the exact number. I tweeted out a little while ago, but the Bills go from about the best run defense to the 26th best run defense in measured by EPA, with Daquan Jones on the field versus Daquan Jones off the field. So he's not going to come and be that good. Poona Ford's not going to ascend to that level, but if they can get back to being a top 10 run defense, that's massive. And what's been the biggest issue now, and the only spot that I think you can contend as a weakness is that other linebacker spot where they keep trying to decide, is it going to be Dodson one week? Is it going to be Williams? Mm-hmm. And I think that helps that spot. It helps solidify that spot, whether it's Dodson, whether it's Williams, and even Bernard, not making their job as young linebackers, as inexperienced linebackers, a lot easier. So you look at what this Bills defense has been able to be when they have a solid, consistent one tech versus when they're not. It completely changes the way their defense plays. And again, they don't need to get back to the number one overall defense. If they can get back and be a top 15 defense, that's really going to help propel this team with the way the offense has been trending since last week.
Oh, 100%. And that's always been my thing too, is when you have an offense that's, propelled by Josh Allen, and it's typically top of the league by DVOA, EPA metrics, you can oftentimes say that, well, we would love to have a top 5 defense. Like you've seen it in years past with other great quarterbacks and great offenses, that they just need to be good. Really. That's it. Like just be good enough, because if you can keep your team in a game, after your team's scoring at a good pace, that's great. And that's kind of what I'm expecting this defense to be now. Now, I'm a firm believer in Sean McDermott's scheme because I believe that pressure trumps any good quarterback. You can always make a quarterback uncomfortable. You can always mess with a quarterback pre and post snap. You can always manipulate the way that they're approaching a game plan and how they're attacking you if you can make them uncomfortable. And I think McDermott predicates himself on that, which is why I believe that this defense is still going to, even if it hasn't found its form now in the wake of the injuries, find it and be a good unit this year. But I think the addition of Lynval Joseph can really help propel that run defense to just be stable, and then not allow teams to get those early down run yards where they're getting 5 or 6 yards a carry and really short seconds and thirds, but rather make it tougher on them. Establish that dominance up front if you can. And then you'll play into the Bills' strength, which right now, I think with the addition of Rasul Douglas, as well as transitioning Poyer over, which again, we could talk about more in time, is their coverage. And hopefully the pass rush can regain form too, with more snaps for Von Miller, as well as the emergence of Epineza, a healed up Rousseau, and Leonard Fournette. So Ryan, any final thoughts on this?
Just wild that he was on the last Giants Super Bowl team. I didn't realize he'd been around. It was one of two signings this week. The one we'll talk about next were just 2 signings that kind of made me feel a little old, because I didn't realize there was anyone from that 2011 Giants team still in the league. But he was a starter on it. That wasn't even his rookie year, so that was kind of a look in the mirror moment for me that I just thought was a wake up call, I should say.
That's actually insane. I did not know that either. Like, I think someone mentioned it in our chat, but
it was me.
That was you? Oh my god!
And then Greg tweeted out that Greg Voorhees tweeted out that he was in the same draft class as Sam Bradford was the first overall draft pick in his draft class, and he was drafted, I think, 3 or 4 picks after the Bills drafted Terrell Troop in front of Rob Gronkowski.
Yeah, that Jesus Christ, dude. I just can't believe like we're talking about a league that no longer features like Rob Gronkowski and like will one day not feature Lynval Joseph. Hopefully, if he plays well enough where that doesn't have to be the end of this season. But I it is really wild to think about his veteran presence. And honestly, for him to still be a contributor for teams at this age is insane. It's just like good on you, man. I'm impressed. But I see a comment here from Charles G that says all three have Super Bowl experience. But that's weird, Ryan. We've only talked about two. Surely that must mean that there's a third edition that they made. And in fact, there is. And that man's name is Leonard Fournette. You know him as Playoff Lenny, Touchdown Lenny, Lombardi Lenny. Now he's Buffalo Lenny, as the Bills had signed him to, I believe, originally the practice squad. But I have full confidence he's going to have a jersey on Sunday night. Let me hear your thoughts on Leonard Fournette, what you think he provides for this offense or how he'll be used.
I think it's one of those situations. I felt about Fournette like I kind of felt about when we drafted Josh Norman, signed Josh Norman this year. It's if I see him in a game, I'm going to assume something kind of went wrong. It probably means we might not see Damian Harris back. But when I look at this sign, and like it's a depth spot. And it's a guy who's played a lot of football in his life. But when I look at him versus Latavius Murray, I think Latavius Murray does just about everything else better. I'd rather have Latavius Murray in the block. I'd rather have Latavius Murray in there. It's just a veteran presence in the offense. I think Latavius Murray has earned the role he's had on this team. And I don't think Fournette coming in to take that spot from him does a whole lot to help this team. Fournette's been a decent pass catcher, so maybe that's a role for him. He's put up over 500 yards the last 2 years with Tom Brady throwing him the football. Another guy that made me feel old, he was an SI cover athlete as a high schooler that when I still was getting SI. So another guy that made me feel a little bit old this week. But he's one of those guys that I think getting worked up that they signed him is silly. Because ultimately you need 53 guys. Damian Harris might not come back this year, but he's not a guy that really moves the needle. And I just really hope doesn't take Latavius Murray's snap, because I've really liked what Latavius Murray's been to this team this year.
Yeah, I don't think that he is. And I actually really like this comment from RJ. I am not sure if Damian Harris is going to continue playing football. He's basically the Harris replacement, perfect for a running back 3 role. So that was something that when they expressed interest, and ultimately, when they backed off, I was originally thinking, okay, so maybe they just, practice squad edition, whatever. It's nothing. Like, they just wanted someone to maybe be behind Ty Johnson if they elevate him. And, Harris will be back eventually. Because we heard whispers about, Harris's future and, is he going to come back, this season? Is he ever going to come back and play football? And now you bring in Leonard Fournette and you sign him, and I'm thinking, I don't know what his future holds. And to be honest, it's obviously Harris's decision. If he decides he is done, the injury was scary enough where he doesn't want to risk it, all power to him. Absolutely wish him the best there. I think Leonard Fournette and his signing and what he could potentially be is what Harris was, which is that third back that just comes in on short downs, or maybe if you need a short down pass catching back or a blocker, you can have him as well. I don't think he's going to take the snaps away from Latavius Murray. I think Murray has more than earned his keep as to how he's being used in this Bills offense, how they're going to attempt to throw him in the mix, whether it's going to be blocking or passing. Murray's role is established. But, when it comes to James Cook, he has a style. Murray has a style. And I think it's always good to keep another one in the chamber. And last season, they tried this 3-headed committee with Moss, Singletary, Cook. And I think that this is just further continuing that trend. And I don't quite think Fournette would ever lap Murray, but I do think that there is opportunity for Fournette maybe in, again, those short distances or in the ends of games where you need to bleed things out or need someone to catch a pass on a short down. He could do that for you.
And Latavius Murray, Leonard Fournette, ultimately, if he's what he ends up being, I guess, our 4th running back this year, 4th running back off the bench if Damian Harris goes down and if, God forbid, another guy goes down in front of him, he's not a bad guy if he's the guy you're pulling off your bench. A lot of the advanced metrics just weren't great on him last year, but the Bills have Dorsey has a good run scheme this year. And, if they're able to find, if he's able to be maybe a product in the passing game, that would be cool. But it's just nothing that moves the needle one way or another for me. If he ends up being a depth piece and he's can LaShawn McCoy his way to another ring, then by all means, come along for the ride.
Shout out to LaShawn McCoy. And shout out to Leonard Fournette, who proved one thing. Dude can wear shorts, man. Like, I'm just going to be real with you. The dude can wear shorts. Perfectly fine saying that. But yeah, so Ryan, any final thoughts on the additions? Like, likelihood we see these guys play on Sunday? And if so, how many snaps do you think you'd see, or percentage of the snaps you think you'd see from them?
We've never really seen them add defensive pieces at the trade deadline. We've seen them get Nyheim Hines. We've seen them get Kelvin Benjamin. And we've seen them be slow burns. We've never seen them go out and get a cornerback before. So we don't have a whole lot of evidence of what that might look like. I don't know the terminology and the language between a Joe Barry defense and a Sean McDermott defense. I don't know how hard of a jump that will be. I'm sure it helps having two guys behind him that have played a lot of Sean McDermott football and probably know the verbiage of the offense better than their social security number at this point. He seems like a smart guy. I'm not gonna get my expectations up that he's gonna play a ton of snaps. Wouldn't be surprised one way or another. I know that sounds like I'm fence sitting, but we don't have a whole lot of evidence of what it looks like when the Bills bring in a defensive player of this caliber at this point in the season. So if he plays a bunch of snaps, awesome. I'm not expecting it. If he doesn't play anything, I would understand why that's the case as well, and I wouldn't be too upset about it. I would hope we get him back come at least week 9 was at least when we this is week 9. So week 10, I think would be a reasonable time to see him taking that full-time role at that position.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring up too, because for McDermott, his trade deadline acquisitions have been Kelvin Benjamin, Nyheim Hines, offensive pieces. You've never seen him actually go get a corner. And I think, a lot of people are going to be expecting a lot of snaps from Douglas right away. Because again, everything we talked about earlier, he's instinctive. He's a great zone corner. But this Bills defense relies a lot on communication and nuance. Like, that is a huge part of how they perform. It's about reading the dude next to you. It's about being able to hear the verbiage and know where you have to be. And obviously in a zone defense, you can't be out of position, or there's a part wide open and you get burned, and we can't have that. So while it is great that we've acquired, Douglas and Joseph and Fournette, I do think that when it comes to actual snaps for a short week where they've come into the organization for the first time, practicing for the first time, learning the playbook for the first time, it's not realistic to say that they would get a brunt of the snaps. I'd love it if Douglas could figure it out in like 2 days and end up playing on Sunday, starting opposite of Benford and looking great. I just don't think it's realistic. I think with Lynval Joseph, I think he does play. And I do think that the percentage of snaps you're going to see him play is akin to what he's really going to have the rest of the season, like no more than like 20%, because he's just a 35-year-old DT that's coming in for cleanup duty. So it's like, you're not going to really lean on that too much, but you will find spots for him in the game. And I think because his workload isn't going to be that heavy, that you could get away with starting him now and just getting him in those spots and getting those reps in, because it's really one job that you have ultimately for him to do. And
yeah,
then,
it's such a specific role.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Fournette, more of the same. Just occasional snaps, like whatever you saw Damian Harris get, probably just going to see Fournette get in his place. And, we'll find out about Harris eventually. But yeah, Ryan, anything else on this?
No, exciting trade deadline. I feel like the last couple of years, we haven't had a lot of talk about around the trade deadline.
I know. Yeah, it's been, well, I mean, like last year was cool to get Hines.
I guess Hines last year.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Hines is a great example too, when you think back to it, or even Kelvin Benjamin. Like, when we got Hines, he was return duty. Like, that's what he was. And, your job was simple. Like, read where the blocks are coming from and like follow it. Like, that was it. And eventually they got some work for him in the offense, but that was really like what he went for. And that was it. So, I mean, it is okay to say like it probably won't be a lot of snaps, especially for a position that requires in my opinion, way more understanding of what you got to do with Douglas. And I think, like, again, 20%, maybe even less. And we'll see more as the weeks go on. But Ryan, before we go into our game discussion itself, I know many people are clamoring for it. I want to tell you and our chat about the cover one pass. And I'll let Greg and Aaron take this one for us. Fellas, what do you got?
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes, please. If you are interested, the link is in the description below. $60 for the year, and you get excellent perks from the Cover One staff. And one of our favorites, I know, Ryan, you said it before, is the Slack channel, where you can have access to 24/7 Bills discussion, as well as some other great insider features. If you are interested, please click the link. And again, everybody, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Ryan appreciates you. We all appreciate you here on the network. If you could please be as kind as to like this video, subscribe to Cover One if you haven't yet, and check out some of the other great content that's on our YouTube, or some of the great articles that we publish on social written by guys like Ryan Uber Hansen. All of the great and talented members of our staff, we would truly, truly appreciate it. But now, let us move on, because there is a big game looming on Sunday night, and that is a divisional round rematch against our familiar foes, the Cincinnati Bengals. So before we get into the nitty-gritty and talk about one or the other, why don't we talk about just our general feelings about this game? Like, how are you just feeling going into the matchup as far as your confidence level and kind of what you're expecting to see?
So I love analytics. I love numbers, but one of my least kind of analytic truths I like to live by with stuff like this is I'm a very big believer until you beat a team, you're not better than them. So that's why I don't really worry about Miami until Miami beats Buffalo in a meaningful game. I'm not worried about them. I always pick the Patriots over the Bills because, not now obviously, but back then, because you have to beat them in a meaningful game. I think, it's the same thing with the Bills. If the Bills and the Chiefs meet in the playoffs again, I'm going to choose the Chiefs because they haven't beaten the Chiefs in a playoff game before. And I think that's where I kind of am with this game. Not that I don't think the Bills can't win. I think the Bills are very capable of winning this game. But Cincinnati, was on the first game was moving the ball up and down the field before the accident. And then the second game took their lunch money, and, different years, different set of circus, different players. But until Buffalo can prove that they can beat them, I'll probably pick Cincinnati to win this game. But I think there's a lot of ways there's a lot of matchups in this game that we'll get into that I think favor Buffalo and, can help Buffalo win this game. So it's by no means, I think these are two very evenly matched football teams.
I think first and foremost, I agree with the take that you got to beat the best to be the best. And I agree that if we have not beaten them, then, by all accounts, they're the better team for now. And I agree that I think there are matchups that benefit the Bills here that I've tweeted about. I know you talked about it, and things will go over that I feel really do lend themselves to the Bills' favor and that we could see a positive performance on Sunday. I think going into this game, one thing that I have preached over and over again, I said it on Thomas's show, I've said it in Spaces, I've said it here in the past, is that McDermott has yet to lose to a team that he's lost to in the playoffs in a rematch. So when he played Jacksonville 2018, after they lost Jacksonville 2018 later in the season, after they lost in the playoffs, they beat them. They lose to the Texans, they beat them in the next matchup. Both of the Kansas City rematches, they win. So when it comes to this game, that's my, based on the trend and history of these matchups, I have the confidence that McDermott has very much emphasized this game as a focal point. And you would do it anyways, but even more so given the litmus test that was the playoffs, where you got spanked in your home field. And now you're going into Cincinnati to essentially get your revenge. I think that the players all know what this is. No one is shying away from the fact that this is the team that beat you last season. And ultimately, it's on you to kind of erase the noise and silence the doubt by going in there and executing, not cracking under pressure, and playing your best ball. And truth be told, I have a lot of confidence in the Bills in this game. I don't have a score prediction. I'm going to say that right now because I'm taking a page out of Anthony's book and not giving you a score prediction because I think it's bad luck. And Ryan, I've given score predictions multiple times the past like 3 weeks. And of course, it's the worst stretch of Bills football this season. So therefore, I think I'm bad luck and not going to do it. But I have a lot of confidence in this team, just given the fact that that Tampa game seemed like a step in the right direction with things to still be improved. But because you have the extra days of rest and the ability to watch more film and prepare a little bit more, because you've seen the Bengals essentially playing at kind of their full capacity where they've beaten some good teams in back-to-back weeks, I genuinely believe that it's better to see a team firing on all cylinders so you have as much as you possibly can to watch on tape and see where you could exploit. I think that benefits the Bills. And I'm very curious how they come out on Sunday night. But ultimately, I think we're going to have a really fun game and one that's driven by a lot of preparation and emotion. So, Ryan, let's get into it. Let's talk first about the Bills offense versus a stubborn Cincinnati Bengals defense. What are your thoughts on this matchup? What do you see from it? Tell me what you think.
I think that it's going to, one of the things that kind of stuck out to me going through the numbers is some of the things that the Bengals have struggled with this year. They have been the 11th worst team defending play action. They have been the 12th worst team defending the run against stacked boxes. The Bills have been the 4th best team against play, and this is on an EPA basis.
Yeah.
EPA per play basis. The Bills have been the 4th best team in play action this year, and the Bengals have been the 12th worst at defending, or the Bills have been the 12th best team at running the heavy boxes this year. So those are kind of two areas that the Bills could potentially take advantage of. And I know we didn't like a lot of those under center stuff. It seemed to make a lot of stuff harder for the Bills, but it's something that the Bengals have had a hard time playing against this year. So there's some areas that the Bills really have a chance to take advantage of the Bengals defense. They have new safeties out there. Dax Hill's only a second-year player out there. It's not Von Bell. They have some good linebackers, but there's spots here on this Bengals defense that have been taken advantage of. And you look at that you look at some of the games they've won of late. You go back to that Seahawks game. Geno Smith was playing a really good game in that Seahawks Bengals game a couple weeks ago, and it was really just a couple untimely turnovers that ruined it. So teams have moved the ball. Even last week against the 49ers, they moved the ball. They just had a couple really, really bad turnovers. So teams have moved the ball on this defense, and a lot of the numbers show that. Yeah.
I do remember Geno Smith, and when the game was over, they showed that there was actually, I can't remember if it was Smith and Jigba or DK Metcalf, but he had a wide open option on the final play of the game that ultimately would have won the game for the Seahawks, but he missed it. But a part of that is because of the pressure, and he probably looked off the read. So I can't say too much about that. But yeah, Ryan, you're right. In the games that I've watched, and I've had the opportunity to watch Cincinnati's last 2 games, their defense is very opportunistic and they can generate turnovers, but it's not impossible to move the ball on them. And I'm really glad you brought up those EPA stats because it kind of does show you that. I think the Bills have, and this is something that I believe we have to kind of take in mind when we talk about this matchup, is that a lot of what I think a lot of fan discourse is based off last season's results, which is fair. That's the last time you played them. But I think it also kind of disregards the changes that both teams have had in the time we've last played. Again, you brought up they don't have Von Bell. They don't have Jesse Bates. Like, those guys are gone. And I think that those are huge parts of their secondary where now you might be able to kind of get some plays in the vicinity of their safety room now just because it's not the same level of experience. I think their pressure is still really, really good. Hubbard, Hendrickson, Reader, like all these guys are immensely talented. And yeah, they have a physical, fast, fun to watch linebacker room. I think the Buffalo Bills in this case are still going to have their hands full, but I think they can exploit the Bengals given some of those stats you've mentioned. I mean, the play action one, I don't know where Josh Allen currently ranks with under center play action compared to weeks past, but he's still one of the best quarterbacks in the league at pulling it off. That much I know for sure. If you can get away with more of that under center play action and really bait them and not let that pressure be a factor and let Allen see the field, I think you're going to have a lot of success. But Ryan, one thing that I stated yesterday, and I've been saying it, I talked to Adam about this, I think it's going to be a huge part of this game, is the Bills RPO. I think that is really the crux of where this team can be successful, especially on the earlier downs, because again, the Bengals are a team that drops a lot of people into coverage, right? Lou Anarumo is a stubborn jerk, and I hate him, but I'm joking. I respect him. I don't actually hate him, but I hate him as a DC because he makes your life a nightmare. But he's really good at manipulating you at the line of scrimmage and dropping people back into coverage. So for me, my whole thing is Josh Allen, his ability to recognize what they're trying to throw at him at the line of scrimmage is everything. And that's an obvious statement you could say every week, but especially for this, because if Allen is able to recognize things at the line of scrimmage, know that they're not actually going to send pressure, know that 8 men are dropping back into coverage, and you have this RPO in your hand, run Cook. Like, get these chunk plays on early downs. Have the choice whether whatever the coverage is dictating to you. If you see pressure, hang on to that ball and fire because someone over the middle might be there. Or if you see that they're vacating the box and you have this middle of the field to work with, exploit it. Get an explosive run with James Cook. I think if you can punch him in the mouth on those early downs, you are going to see this team have success, move the ball, and ultimately where it comes down to, like you alluded to, Ryan, is just avoiding that turnover, avoiding the opportunistic part for the Bengals defense, and don't allow yourself to give Joe Burrow short field.
And the drop that middle, that when you open up that RPO game, it allows Josh to just work so much quicker. You look how quickly they were able to move against Tampa Bay, when Tampa Bay is known for blitzing. Todd Bowles loves the blitz. He loves to bring exotic looks. And Josh really got back to taking that apart. That was the issue with that Patriots game, is they were doing so much of that under center stuff, and they were doing so much of that those condensed looks, and the Patriots just kept getting free runner after free runner after free runner, and Josh just wasn't reading well. It seems like when he gets to run from shotgun, gets to open it up, gets to spread it out, he's just able to dissect the offense so much easier, and you now have players that are starting to come into their own role in this team, in Dalton Kincaid, in Khalil Shakir. And you have these guys that, all three of those, when they have Kincaid, Shakir, Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs all out on the field, it's such a dangerous look because they can all do different things. You can push them out. You can put Shakir in the slot. You can put Diggs in the slot. You can put Gabe in the slot. You can put Kincaid in the slot. All four of those guys are super, super interchangeable and have really, really unique skill sets. So it seems like if they can keep that, keep up the tempo, keep it spread out, and just make things easier for Josh Allen, that's what got him that's what got him in those couple games, is he just wasn't seeing the field well. And it seems like when they run those RPOs and spread it out at 11 personnel, he reads everything a lot easier and he's able to make a lot better decisions.
And he had a great quote this week. I think that translates to what they were trying to pull off in the Buccaneers game. Something I think they might pull out again this week against the Bengals. And that's how I'm paraphrasing it, but essentially going up tempo slows things down in itself. Like, you and your ability to create more pace and move quickly and get in rhythm faster keeps a defense on its toes and kind of simplifies things a bit, because there isn't as much time to call anything as complex as it could possibly be if you're getting in a huddle and giving a defense more time to prepare. So I think in this game, you could also see a bit more of that up-tempo approach. And one thing that I loved about the Tampa game, and something that I'm hoping they do more, is, again, like you said, they have a myriad of playmakers outside of Stephon Diggs. Ones that I think, excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. Ones that I think could attack the middle of the field, an area that I feel like the team has been searching for a fill-in suitable option for, and we thought they, and I still think they do have it on this roster, but with the draft of Dalton Kincaid and a guy like Khalil Shakir emerging, I see Roy talking about Shakir in the chat. I think that in this game, what I'd like to see as well is more of that utilization of Gabe Davis, of Khalil Shakir over the middle of the field, relying on them to kind of get the ball in their hands quickly rather than forcing things down by the boundaries and hoping you can get a long developing play out of it. Because again, with the way Lou attacks Josh Allen, I am very convinced that this game is going to be a lot of drops in coverage. You don't want to give Allen free spots in the middle of the field. And you could send pressure at him and it'll probably hit home a few times. But at the same time, if you continue to throw it nonstop, he will recognize it. And the thing that encouraged me about that, Ryan, was Tampa game. That's what we needed to see from him. He was having a hard time in that Patriot game, picking up on where the blitz was coming from, reading it effectively, and being decisive on what throw he had to make. He got better with it against Tampa. So I want to see more of that. And I think more of those options being present for him in the shorter to intermediate distances versus having Diggs, and Davis essentially full boundary all the time, or maybe Davis is full boundary all the time and Diggs is moving around, which I do love that they do that, but offer that wrinkle with Davis because I thought it worked really well and I'd like to see it continue.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like, I think Bruce Nolan really puts it best that I don't want Kincaid coming off the field unless he's puking or needs water. And I think the really fun thing that we've seen with Shakir is he can do a lot of the nasty things well. He's a guy you can put in there on run support, on run downs, and he's going to block his butt off. Nate Tice put out a clip during the after the Patriots game of him in pass protection. So, not only can, when you have all those guys out there, it's not 12 the pro personnel that we were really hoping for, but you can do probably a lot of things that you can do out of 12 personnel just because between Shakir and Gabe and Dalton Kincaid, who's still developing as a blocker, can do so many of those that dirty work.
And you've seen improvements in blocking reps from Kincaid and Shakir. And I honestly think, we were clamoring about where is Shakir? What's taking so long? A lot of people were very upset with the pacing, right? And last year you saw some whiffs, some just genuinely terrible blocking from Khalil Shakir. This year he's improved drastically in that spot. And I think they have recognized it enough to get him more snaps each and every game to the point where now they have faith in him to stay on the field, be able to block, but also be able to go out and run a route and be open. And now you're seeing him kind of flourish because each week there's more and more coming for him. And that Tampa game, again, just his ability to kind of get himself in those spots of success. That one play where he laid the boom down and got those extra yards, I'm sure that was a statement just in itself about how much more he's going to get used and how he deserves it. And his ability to just find the soft spots. That is what I'm looking for from him. And I think that he's developing into that. Now you pair him with Kincaid, and again, Davis, Diggs, goes without saying for Diggs, but Davis, and you have this option where you could get a ball to someone in the middle of the field, something that I think they've needed to improve on, and I think it's going to continue to improve as the season goes on. But that's pretty much my thoughts on that. Ryan, any more thoughts about the Bills offense versus the Bengals defense?
No, just I think another big change from last year to this year under Bills offense is just the line's so much better this year. The Bills are second in PFF's pass blocking efficiency, which is, if you guys don't know what that is, it's not one of their grades. It measures pressures allowed on a per snap basis with a little extra weight towards sacks. And the Bills are second in that metric this year. I don't know how they calculate what an allowed sack is, but the Bills line has only been credited with 5 sacks. I think Josh has been sacked 12 times this year, the number. I might be off on that, but PFF is only accredited 5 sacks of the Bills offensive line this year. So the Bills line is a lot better, which also will help against a team that wants to confuse Josh with pressures.
100%. And Dirty Jersey with the comment, O-line has been blocking very well too. I think that is directly reflected in Josh's completion percentage. I agree. I think also Josh has had just a lot of games where they've predicated on getting the ball out a bit faster, especially against Tampa. Also, thank God Vita Vea wasn't playing. I think we should address that too as part of the reason why they were able to kind of exploit the Buccaneers pass rush a bit. But yeah, when you're playing good defenses with really stout lines, you're not keeping that ball in his hands that long. And I think that's a part of it. But also, yeah, their offensive line has morphed into something of really a revelation as far as how high up in the league they are in pass blocking metrics. And I think this is the line we've wanted Josh to have for quite some time. You've seen just this vast improvement on the interior next to Morse, obviously with the Osiris Torrance being a very solid rookie. Connor McGovern's been a very good signing. And then, of course, Spencer Brown taking that step forward as a result. These are the things that we really wanted from this line. And I'm hoping that they can continue this performance on Sunday against a very, 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 very good Bengals pass rush. But Ryan, let's move on now and let's talk about the other side of it, which is this Bills defense versus this Bengals offense. Obviously, it's Joe Burrow. fantastic elite quarterback, pinpoint precision, as accurate as anybody in the league, and can make you pay if you make a mistake. We've seen him do it to us.
And healthy.
And healthy now. That calf no longer hurts. He has the ability to move if he needs to move. What are you thinking about this matchup, just as far as how this Bills defense can stymie this really resurgent Bengals offense?
A tale as old as time. Pressure. The Bengals offensive line is giving up is the 18th ranked line in PFF's pass blocking efficiency this year. The Bills are the 5th best team at generating pressures this year. Big mismatch in that position. So again, Lynval Joseph could help that. If I thought Von Miller had some really good snaps at the end of that Tampa Bay game. If he can continue coming along, that's massive. I wrote these notes like 30 minutes before going on, so forgive me here.
All good. Man.
That's a discrepancy that you can take advantage of. The Bengals are the. Oh yeah, so I think the big thing the Bengals do a really good job of that's a mismatch the other way is the Bengals do a really good screen game. They use a screen game at the 9th highest rate, and they have the 3rd best success rate in the NFL in it. And I don't have the numbers on how good the Bills are at defending screens, but if you just think about it anecdotally, there's a lot of times this year where it feels like the Bills have gotten picked apart on screens. Obviously, that big screen to Ramondre Stevenson at the end of that Patriots game comes to mind. Joe Mixon's a really good running back coming out on screen. So if you're looking for what might plague the Bills defense is that game right there. Is the Bengals have had a really, really effective screen game this year with Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon's playing some good football this year.
Yeah. The Ramondre Stevenson screen still makes my blood boil to this day. It's only a few weeks removed, but it will always make my blood boil. And yeah, that is definitely an area of concern I have, is how they're willing to defend on the outside there. Because again, the Bengals being able to pull that off the way they do. And I think a part of that too is just how Burrow can place a ball in the perfect spot and be able to get whatever it's his back or his receiver in the perfect position to get those yards after catch. They better be prepared for that, man, because that's a huge point of emphasis that I think the Bengals are going to try and address early on in the game. And you need to take momentum away from that offense any way you can. And if I could see that this Bills defense, mainly just in one-on-one situations, can close down and make some key tackles, it'll be very encouraging, because that usually is a weak point for this type of defense. But Ryan, one thing that I had alluded to before that I think is going to be a huge part of this game is how they throw these dime looks at the Bengals offense. Now, we saw it against Tampa Bay. They had Jordan Poyer playing that dime backer role, and then you have Rapp and Hyde behind him. I think that is the answer, truthfully. And Bruce Nolan mentioned this briefly on the show last week. And, I fully agree, and I will carry that sentiment. I think in the wake of Dorian Williams' development, he will still be getting snaps. He'll still be getting his share. Absolutely. But I do not think that this is a game that you can afford to let Dorian figure it out, because you are playing one of the best pocket passing quarterbacks in the league. And if Dorian is biting on these routes where he's not supposed to be out of his spot, we're going to get burned. I love the idea of Jordan Poyer maintaining the dime backer role for a few reasons. The first being that you have an aging safety that now doesn't have as much field to cover. He's not in the back end. He's up front. He's with his linebackers, and he's commanding a short part of the field and basically being the guy that takes the middle away. And to couple that, the other reason is Jordan Poyer is one of our smartest players. He is a very good athletic safety. When you bring someone like him up, I feel like his ability to process what's going on at the line of scrimmage, his ability to communicate, his physicality, it's all things that you'd want from a weak side linebacker that you had pretty much in Matt Milano that I feel like Poyer can supplement for. And I think that this is why it was so big that you went and got Taylor Rapp, because I like Rapp in coverage. I think he's still ironing out a few kinks in coverage. He had a few blown ones last week, but I do like Taylor Rapp's ability to cover. I like his athleticism. And I think that by bringing Poyer up into that spot, you offer this opportunity to kind of attack the Bengals offense the way you attack the Miami offense, which is we are going to try and get pressure up the interior and also make Tua hold the ball and have to look off his reads. It's the same thing that I think they're going to do to Cincinnati, and try to do, I should say, is with Poyer up there, commanding that middle of the field spot, relying on the coverage on the back end, forcing Burrow to not be able to hit those quick hits like he did in the playoff game and have these longer developing routes downfield with Chase and Higgins, then you allow your pass rush, which I think, like you said before, with good reps, I think Von Miller is getting more in this game. You have Leonard Floyd still, Rousseau, Epineza. There is this opportunity to establish pressure on Burrow, establish it early, and I think Poyer is a huge part of that.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you some cherry pick stats here that I think speak to your point here, because we love confirming priors. So if you look back, so I went through and I did, SIS has a really cool on-off tracker where you can measure how teams do when a player is on the field and off the field. So if you just look at last week with Taylor Rapp on the field, and I took off the fourth quarter because the fourth quarter had those couple really fluky plays that kind of, I think, threw off the metrics, the helmet off, mainly the helmet play off Benford's helmet. But even just through the first three, and then they were playing prevent defense after that. So looking at the first 3 quarters of last week, the Bills defense was better by 0.2 of a point on EPA per pass. So to give you a kind of how that stands up against the rest of the league here, that's through the first 3 quarters of last week, that would be about the equivalent of going from the 5th best passing defense to the about 5th best to about 10th best passing defense. So more simply said, the Bills passing defense with Taylor Rapp on the field is better than it is with off him. Even if you go back to the start of the league, every time Taylor Rapp's been on the field for the Bills, they have produced a better EPA per play against the pass. So he has been a really good player in that respect. You look at where Taylor Rapp's got in trouble, it's when they try to play Taylor Rapp close to the line. Jordan Poyer in his old age has been, as he gets older, he's still a super reactive player. He's still a super smart player, and he's still a super physical player. So it really seemed like last week in particular, which that Buccaneers defense still has some players on it. Mike Evans is still a player. Chris Godwin is still a player. That's still an offensive line that's got some dudes on it, and they seem to really confuse Baker with a lot of those looks. So if you can get, Taylor Rapp is really proving to be a really solid signing here. And if they can just find ways to throw him in the field, keep him on the field and limit the amount of times you have to have Terrell Dodson or Dorian Williams in space, it really, all the evidence points to that. That's the best way. That's the best. I think that's the best version of the Bills defense at this point is Jordan Poyer playing linebacker. And it's funny because we've kind of joked about it. I feel like for you, people have kind of offhand joked about making Jordan Poyer a linebacker anyways. And it's kind of funny that this Bills defense now has kind of 2 DBs that are, if you played them at linebacker, you probably wouldn't think about it. And Teron Johnson and Jordan Poyer now.
Yeah.
So they're really suited for that just with the way their guys play. So Taylor Rapp, getting him as much time back there and pushing Jordan Poyer closer to the line, I think really, really helps this defense. Another way to just help get this defense to a middle ground where they're not the 28th best defense in DVOA anymore.
Yeah, and I think that, you bring up Dodson and Williams. I do think Dorian Williams is going to get there and be that depth weak side linebacker we need. I really do believe that he has the traits for it. I think he's just learning. It's rookie growing pains, and it's unfortunate because we didn't want to have to deal with rookie growing pains because we have our all-pro starter at that spot, but injuries happen, and this is what you get. But yeah, I agree with that, Ryan. It actually is pretty nuts to think about the fact that we had talked all offseason about, well, they brought in Taylor Rapp because they wanted to do the dime, and the dime backer is going to be Taylor Rapp. Turns out we were kind of right, except the dime backer's Poyer and Rapp's playing the conventional safety. So it was a little flipped around, but we are seeing that more, and it's really nice to know that the metrics favor keeping Poyer up at the line. And another thing, too, that I forgot to mention before is one of the benefits of it, too, is Poyer, we know, is a good blitzing safety as well. He can penetrate through a gap and get to a quarterback and wrap up for a sack. So it's not just the fact that Poyer comes up and can play coverage, but Poyer's ability as a pass rusher matters, too. And that's part of the pre-snap confusion that could go to Joe Burrow and really any quarterback you play when Poyer's involved in the game is if I see him and he's close to me, I have no idea if he's rushing the gap or if he's dropping back and if they're going to send someone else from a different side. So that's really kind of the part that excites me about this concept and about having Hoyer in the spot is not only his coverage ability, but your potential to shoot him through a gap and hit home on a quarterback and ultimately have success, which again, one more wrinkle to confuse a really good quarterback in Joe Burrow on Sunday. But
yeah. And I think you need to do a lot. One thing Joe Burrow does a really good job of is he's spectacular at picking apart blitzes. I think you got to find ways to confuse them that aren't blitzes, because I think Burrow is probably the closest quarterback we have in the league now to Brady. Not maybe, in fact, not accolades, maybe not even, not a 1-for-1, but the fact that I think what he does better than anyone is he knows where the ball's supposed to go on every single play. He's smart. He stands in there, and he's going to go where he's supposed to go with the ball. So I think if you try to blitz him, he's going to pick you apart. So
yeah,
those simulated pressures, I think, are going to be massive.
100%. Yeah, I definitely don't imagine McDermott sending more than 5 often in this game, unless it's a super deep down and distance where you feel like you can get away with it. But yeah, I, truth be told, would much rather try to hit home with 4 or 5 man pressures where you just disguise who's coming versus sending 7 or, whatever. Because I think they did try that a couple times against Tampa Bay and they got burned. So I like blitzing. I support blitzing. I support aggression. I support it when the time calls for it. And I support it when the quarterback you're playing calls for it. And I think you can pull off those really intense pressure packages where there's a lot of people coming at you against inexperienced quarterbacks. And McDermott's record against first and second year guys is really good for that reason. But when you're talking about a, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, I don't think you can get away with that too much. And I don't think they'll do it too much, except for when the duty calls for it in the game. But Ryan, I really got nothing else to contribute to this. Can you think of any more for this defense versus the Bengals offense before we sign off today?
I think my only big thing is I love what they've always done against Miami since Tyreek Hill's been there. If someone's going to beat you, don't let it beat Jamar Chase. I think let someone beat you who isn't Jamar Chase. If we lose this game and it's because Tyler Boyd had a big game or Higgins had a big game, then whatever, I'm fine with it. But
yeah,
I think if they can find a way to make another Bengal who isn't Jamar Chase win this game for them, I think that would go, because the Bills, they did it against Tyreek Hill in week 4. So I think if they can take away Jamar Chase in the same way they took away Hill, I think that would go a pretty long way in helping their case. And not that that's a bold take there. If you stop Jamar Chase, you'll have a better chance of winning. But
it would certainly be ideal if they could stop Jamar Chase. And also, I think about the Bengals tight end room too. And a big point of emphasis amongst their fan base is they didn't really address that position in the draft much. Not to say they didn't take anybody, but like high tier talent, like going after one of the premier Laporta, Kincaid, or Meyer, or even really signing anybody. They brought in Irv Smith Jr., who has a notable injury history and, has been whatever, after losing Hayden Hurst, who I thought was a decent tight end. And I think you don't have as much stress in the tight end room this time you face them. And I think that's a benefit to the Bills passing defense because it allows you to kind of more hyper-focus now on Jamar Chase. And if you can kind of keep him in a box, then yeah, you either deal with Tyler Boyd in the slot, which again, if your middle of the field is shored up by Jordan Poyer, Terrell Bernard, then it's really T. Higgins' time to shine. And Higgins, I think, is playing a little bit banged up too. So it's going to be an interesting matchup with this Bills defense, but I'm decently confident in them. I want to see them carry over that momentum from the Tampa Bay game and show some of that dominant chest puffed out. If they can do that, I think they'll have a lot of success, but we'll have to wait and see. But
I like symmetry. You look at that 2021. I know the 2021 team didn't win a Super Bowl, but they had that really ugly loss to the Patriots. They go on and they kind of find their groove in the second half against Tampa Bay the next week. And then they go on a run and become, until 13 seconds happen. So hoping for a little bit of symmetry where they get beat up by New England. They get their feet right. They get right against Tampa Bay. And hopefully we see a little bit of a rebound like we did in 2021 here.
I'm hoping for it, man. And again, look at the AFC as a whole, too. It isn't just the Bills. There are a lot of contemporaries that have had their ugly games. I mean, you can look at teams around the league. Kansas City just lost to Denver, a team that got 70 hung up on them by Miami, who lost to Buffalo, who lost to, you know what I mean? football is a weird sport. There's a lot of parity. You're allowed to be upset at the results. This is not me absolving the Bills of their sins. They had some ugly games that I will fully tell you were ugly games. But I think it's also like the Bengals right now, like, have had ugly games. The Chiefs have had ugly games. Like, there is no perfect team in this conference. It's about getting hot at the right time and being able to just establish yourself when it really counts. And that's when you get into the playoffs. And I'm hoping that on Sunday night, the Bills can prove that they are a playoff team against a team that has jaded them in the past. But that's it for me, man. Ryan, you got anything else before we sign off?
That's all I got. Find me at Sports Rock 2 on Twitter. Dropped an article this week with midseason grades over on the Cover One website. You can tell me what you think of them. And I'm going to go spend the rest of my day watching college football, I think.
Ah, yes, a nice college football Saturday. And for all of you that joined the chat today, for all of you that are watching this after it went live, and for all of you that are listening to this on all of our streaming platforms, let me be the first to tell you thank you so much for watching this week's episode of Under Review. I say it every week, but I'm going to say it again. I appreciate all of you who tune in, check this out, check out any of our stuff that's on Cover One. It means the world to me. It means the world to everybody that we can be on this platform to talk about this matchup and have you all willing to listen. Thank you so much for your contributions in the chat, or any kind or not kind words that you say. We appreciate every single one of you. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. I tweet about all things football. I tweet about things that don't involve football. I'm just a dude with a Twitter account at the end of the day.
Sometimes I tweet about food, and they're really good takes.
No, they're not. No, they're not. What's your favorite candy bar, Ryan? Want to tell us on the air what your favorite candy bar is?
I'm not okay. First of all, 100 grand was not my favorite. I'm saying more people should eat 100.
Right.
More people should eat 100-gram bars. They're a significantly underrated candy bar.
Okay. I thought it was favorite. That is my bad. I misinterpreted your tweet about your candy bar preference. That is my fault. I will be better in the future, Ryan, about it. What is your favorite candy bar?
Twix.
Okay, that's a good take. So maybe you should actually hear his food takes on Twitter. I don't know. But all of you, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I will be back next weekend with another show. Please check out Ryan's articles on all of our Cover One social media platforms if you can. I am hoping for a fun game on Sunday night. Let's hope for a good result. And as always, enjoy your weekends and go Bills. See you soon.
Go Bills.